Well, hello everyone, welcome. I wanted to talk today a little bit about my decision-making process for when I move camps or pick a camp based on weather. After I published that last video, I think from the comments there was some confusion perhaps as to why exactly I made the decision I made, or if I was trying to always have perfect weather. And it's basically not possible, of course, to always have ideal weather, unless even if you drove thousands of miles in a month, you're still going to sometimes run into weather that's not ideal, I think. There are basically three criteria I use that factor into when I'm choosing a camp, and I'm looking at the weather, and as well as when I'm thinking about moving camps, and again looking at the weather. So I look at a lot more than the weather, but the weather is one thing I do look at, and I track that. Usually do quick looks on my phone. Sometimes I'll use more detailed views like weather.com or the National Weather Service websites to get more information if I think I need it. But before I jump into the three things I use, I want to emphasize that these are things that work for me. This is the way I do it, but I'm not saying everyone should do it like I do. And these are things that I've kind of learned and evolved with over the time I've been on the road full-time. These are not things I necessarily knew when I started, so I think it might be useful to share my system for those of you who are thinking about getting on the road, or you're just getting out on the road. And for those of you who've been on the road a while, you probably have your own system, but you still might find it entertaining to see how I do things. Sort of like the same reason we like van tours, right? It's always fun to see how somebody else is doing it. But I learned these things by experience and by friends sharing their knowledge and experience with me. So I'll kind of pass that along now in the hopes of helping some of you who are getting started. But like I said, these are just the things that work for me. Your exact criteria you use to evaluate weather will depend on a number of variables, like what you consider as ideal weather, and how much you're willing to put up with weather that you don't think is ideal, and the type of vehicle you have, and even the amount of supplies you're able to carry when you're out camping. So the first thing that I look at is obviously weather that I think is going to be comfortable or pleasant. And for me, when I'm in the desert, that generally means daytime temperatures 65 to 75 because I'm parked in the sun. Much below 65 is kind of cool, and much above 75 I find to be starting to get uncomfortably warm, particularly in the afternoons because there's just not much shade out here. And of course I have to be parked where I can get solar anyways. So those are kind of my what I consider good in the desert. When I'm in the forest, I bump that up. I might think ideal temperatures are between 70 and 80, maybe even low 80s, because you can get some shade, and of course if there's a breeze, that factors in too. But those are just kind of the daytime temperatures that are comfortable for me. So if I have a choice, I'm going to go with somewhere that's going to have those kind of temperatures. Obviously that doesn't always work. Sometimes it's cooler than that, sometimes it's hotter than that, and that's just life. Makes you appreciate the ideal weather when you get it. Nighttime temperatures, again, if you start getting, I think ideals are 40s to 50s overnight. Starts getting much warmer than that, you get a real heat wave, and it's only getting into 60 or 65 at night. This can be warm, when you're in a vehicle, and you start getting down to the 30s. I can handle that pretty good. I sleep warm and I got decent sleeping bag. But you start getting into the 20s, it starts getting chilly. I can sleep okay in that, but it's the time before bed and after bed. You have to run heat to, so I can feel my fingers to type and things on the computer. So again, I can live with it, but it's not ideal for me. So at his last repositioning, when I was over at Saddle Mountain near Phoenix, I had to go into Phoenix, and so I had to break camp for that anyways. And I'd been there about a week, and I really enjoyed the time I was there. I definitely plan on going back. One of the nicest sites I've stayed at, definitely in the last 4 months for sure. But just a really nice site. But I'd been there for a week, and the last day or two I was there were more campers coming in, so it wasn't crowded like Ehrenberg and Quartzsite are in the winter, but it was a little more. There were more people around than there were before, and I'd been there for a week, so I was pretty well ready to move on since I had to break camp and go into Phoenix anyway. I'm getting ready to head up to Wyoming earlier than I normally would because I need to take care of some business up there, but I need to go through Utah in the Salt Lake area, so that means my next serious stop is going to be Lake Havasu City area. And I had pretty much 3 ways to get there from Phoenix, and they're all pretty similar mileage-wise. So since that's where I'm going next, and the mileage is similar, the weather is going to be one thing that I'm going to be looking at. And in this case, that big storm system that came across through California also came across Arizona. And southern Arizona got less of it than northern Arizona. So the way that worked out with this particular storm was that Quartzsite and Ehrenberg were getting 1 day of rain on Saturday. Saddle Mountain and Phoenix was to get 2 days of rain, Saturday and Sunday, while up in Sedona, where I had originally planned on going through, they were to get 4 days of rain and even a snow mix from Friday through Monday. And when I left Ehrenberg, the temperatures were getting into the 80s, it was getting kind of uncomfortably warm. It was a little better at Saddle Mountain and Phoenix, and Sedona was supposed to be in the 60s. So that looked, workable. A little cooler than I would think ideal, but workable for sure. And what happened with this storm system that came through was not only was it cooler during the storm, but it cooled the temperature across the entire state for at least a week afterwards. So that made Sedona, the combination of the 4 days of rain when I'd be stuck in the vehicle and the cooling temperatures made it just not ideal for me. And since I had to go to Lake Havasu anyways, passing through Ehrenberg for a couple days gave me pretty ideal weather with not really much difference in mileage. So that's why I made that decision. Now, when you're in a vehicle, especially in a small vehicle, it's not the end of the world when you get a day of rain, but it is inconvenient. You're stuck inside, and I like to be outside a lot, so it's kind of inconvenient. I'm stuck inside, and it just gets horribly muddy. Anytime you get in and out, and so you're tracking all that mud into the van. So, it's something you got to deal with sometimes, but if I can avoid it, I'm going to avoid it. So the second thing that I consider with weather is solar power. I'm a freelancer. I make my living doing freelance work in the van, so I rely on a steady electric supply to run my electronics. Right now I have a 100-watt solar panel, and I have a single deep cycle battery that's like 92 amp hour, I believe. The catch with the battery is it's not in the greatest shape. I got it when I was in the Camry and didn't have a great way to charge it. I only got it because I killed the battery in the car one day when I was working. So it holds like a 75% charge, and that means if I've got good sun, I get more than enough power all day long to run electronics and charge everything up. And between my battery and the charge and the laptops, I have more than enough if I want to do a couple hours of work in the evening. It works out just fine. What doesn't work out so fine is if I have a lot of rainy days. One rainy day I can weather if I have everything charged up ahead of time. I may have to be a little careful with power, but I can get through it. You start getting into 2, 3, 4 rainy days, and I don't have enough power, so then I'm looking at not being able to work for a few days as well. I ran into this even in the trailer. I had 190 watts of solar on the roof and 2 6-volt deep cycles in there that were, I believe, over 200 amp hours combined. So a pretty good system, but still, if it was rainy for more than one day, I would have problems and have to start unplugging the refrigerator and rationing the laptop usage and things. So it's something you got to think about if you need electricity. Now, if I had 300 watts of solar and a better battery bank, sure, I could weather 3 days pretty good. Or if I had a good solenoid or isolator hooked up with an engine so I could charge off that in between, that would be okay too. But all I have is a trickle charge off the engine that it would just take, it wouldn't charge the battery enough to cover things. So it's something I can use when I'm traveling to make sure that things are topped off a little bit, but it's not something that really is going to recharge the batteries while I'm using them. So I have to think about solar as well, and that's the case where by coming here, I was able to be charged up ahead of time for the one rainy day. I had the panel out in the rain anyway, so I got a little bit of charge the few times the sun broke through the clouds, but not much. But I was able to get through. But if I'd been up in Sedona where it was rainy for 4 days, I'd have been in a bad spot with power. And then the third thing that I look at, and this was not something I had ever thought about before I was on the road, and that is that a lot of the places where I end up camping, they're on BLM or Forest Service roads. And these roads are generally classified as primitive, and they may receive on the good end, they may receive very limited maintenance, meaning they might run a grader over it once or twice a year. And on the other end of things, they may receive no maintenance at all for years at a time. And if you're used to driving on paved roads, that's a bit of an adjustment. And these roads really, oftentimes, there are some that are real roads, but oftentimes they're no more than just tracks through the desert or the forest. They're just paths where people have driven, like an old wagon path, a wagon trail. And so as soon as it rains on them, they just are not passable. And that's especially a problem if you get several days in a row of rain, where you literally may be stranded and not able to get out for days after the rain stops. And I'm a little sensitive to this, I suppose, because I saw this last summer in Flagstaff. We were actually camped a little bit west of Flagstaff in the National Forest, the Kaibab National Forest, and we were stranded for days and days and days at a time, and we couldn't get out. The roads were just destroyed. And you have a similar problem in the desert where they still turn into soup, but you also, a lot of these BLM roads in the desert pass through a series of washes, and those washes, as soon as you get a heavy rain, they flood and often carry away parts of the road. So even after the road dries out enough you can drive on it, you may find that the washes are destroyed and you can't pass through the wash, particularly if you're in a minivan or a car or any other low-profile vehicle. You might have a little better luck with some of them with a four-wheel drive. So that's something else to think about. And sometimes I'll still just tough it out if I'm well supplied on water and food, and if I don't have to be anywhere anytime too soon, and if I'm basically feeling okay with that. Other times, there have been times I just go into town and hang out, somewhere in town or something till the rain's gone in a parking lot, because I don't want to take a chance on getting stranded. And you could be stranded for quite a while in some of these places. So those are those are the three main things that I look at when I'm considering the weather. It's not just, is the weather pleasant, but it's also, am I going to be able to maintain enough power with the solar setup I have right now to be able to work reliably, and am I going to get stranded? And so in this case, 1 day of rain, I was fairly confident I could manage all the way around. But 2 or 3 or 4 days of rain would have caused me some problems that I might not have wanted to deal with. So those are some of the reasons I make the decisions I make based on weather. And like I say, you may have different priorities based on that. You may have a vehicle that handles muddy, washed out roads better than mine does. You may have a higher risk tolerance where you're willing to take certain risks that I'm just not willing to take, at least most of the time. And you may be able to carry enough food and water that you're comfortable being stranded for a week. I can manage about a week's worth of food and water in the minivan comfortably. Although my diet's getting a little blander towards the end of the week, but I can manage that all right. Now, like in the trailer, between the storage I had for food and the full kitchen setup I had, which made it easy to cook, and the big chest refrigerator, I could easily carry 2 weeks worth of food and 2 weeks worth of water. Probably closer to 3, and I'm sure if I wanted to, I could have got 4 weeks in. So that was a little bit less of a concern in terms of being stranded, as long as I didn't have to be anywhere on a certain time frame. But with a van, you have to think about it. And when I had the car, I carried even less food and water, so just because of space. So depending on the setup you've got, the vehicle and the setup and your risk tolerance and some other, and what you consider to be comfortable weather, you may make different decisions or may prioritize things differently. But those are the things that I look at when I'm considering the weather, and when I'm considering whether I want to camp in a certain place or whether I want to reposition Generally, I'm not going to go and drive 100 miles just to miss a day of rain. That's not, you know, I'm not that finicky. But you know, if I'm repositioning anyways, sure, I'm going to look at the weather. If I have 2 or 3 different routes that are roughly equal, and one has weather that I think is going to be more comfortable, yeah, I'll definitely take the one that has more comfortable weather. And if I'm looking at making a move, you know, yeah, I'll consider the weather and see if it's going to be a good fit for me in terms of comfort and in terms of reliable electricity that I need for work, and in terms of not getting stranded. So I just don't want to get stranded. So those are the things I look at. Hopefully that helps you if you're new on the road or just still thinking about getting on the road. Like I said, you may come up, you will come up with your own criteria for what's important to you on that. But that's my process that I work through when I'm deciding where I'm going or if I need to move camp, because those are things that are important to me. You know, if any of you have some experience with this and have different ideas for how you do things or how you assess weather, you know, by all means, leave them in the comments. We can provide some good information for those who are, you know, still looking to get on the road or are new at it. Like I said, I certainly benefited from some friends who shared information with me and warned. For example, it was, you know, Deborah Dickinson actually is the one who warned me about the roads becoming impassable when it rains. You know, well, if you're only drive on improved roads, you might not think about that. Or if you mostly are you know, doing camping at campgrounds or in you know, urban stealth parking, you may not think about that. But if you get out boondocking, it's, you know, it can be primitive, and the roads can wash out or become impassable quite quickly in bad weather. So definitely something to think about, and you may choose to ride it out, but if you do, you want to make sure you're well supplied before that weather hits. All right, so I hope that was helpful to you, and at least gives you a better insight into the decision-making process that I use. I don't think I really explained that very well in the last video. May have sounded like I was only made decisions based on finding pleasant weather, and that's certainly one part of it. That's one reason why I'm on the road, is because I don't like winter. So I try to position myself where I'm going to enjoy the weather, because I like to be outside. So and I spend as much time as possible outdoors. So given the choice, I always pick what I'm going to consider to be comfortable weather. So we'll see you in the next video.